Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I'm your host, Angela Wetzel. I'm a trauma-informed relationship coach, founder of Epic Initiator Coaching. This is also your host here, Nick Carl, founder of Safe Anchor. He's a somatic coach, and we're here on the So Emotional podcast to help remove the stigma and enigma around emotions to really help you further along on your emotional journey, because I really think it's all about emotions. And today we have a very special guest and friend of mine, Jane Ysadora. And she's a trauma-informed business coach, as well as the pioneer of the trauma-informed manifesting movement. And Jane is a real powerhouse. Like she's a boss. She's probably seen a lot, done a lot. Well, actually, I know she's seen a lot and done a lot. So mad respect for Jane. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, Jane.
Welcome.
Thanks. I actually have a hat that says the boss.
So, and if you notice the poster behind her, it says, "I like the way you work it, no diggity," which is one of my favorite songs.
Now it's in everybody's heads forever.
Yes, no diggity. So I actually met Jane in 2019 at a trauma-informed event. And I just remember, like, we actually didn't become friends, I don't think, when we were there exactly, but we kind of met briefly, and then we sort of developed more of a friendship after that. But I remember, like, seeing you get up and speak on the microphone about these businesses that you had and, like, going into creating a new business. And on this podcast, one of the main things that we talk about is, like, what was that moment in your journey, and however much you want to share, when you were just like, emotions, like these might be an important thing to like look at or maybe feel or maybe deal with.
Yeah. I was a super emotional kid. And that's what gave me the extraordinary skill of being able to suppress my emotions. Because, very large family, being incredibly sensitive, incredibly emotional, being one of the youngest of 6 kids, I got picked on a lot for how sensitive and how emotional I was. And, the theme was going to like be tougher. And I did certainly get, I don't know, I wouldn't call it like tougher, but better at masking, better at hiding. And I probably kept that up for, until I couldn't anymore, until I absolutely couldn't, which for me was in my late 20s. When, I had some really massive life changes. I had gone through like a very sudden divorce as a mom of 2 small children, and just had such crippling anxiety and depression, but also a lot of hubris to, like good hubris, healthy hubris, to not take that on as a diagnosis or as like something that could hold me back, but just as something that was transformable. Like I really believed, like it never occurred to me that that was something that I would be saddled with indefinitely. It was just like, oh, like I now see that this is a thing. I don't want to have it. And that was kind of the beginning of my personal growth journey.
Damn.
So it's been, I don't know, 15, 17-ish. Like I'm old now. 2006, I guess, is probably like mid-20s, 2006, 2007.
Yeah. So one of the things that really fascinated me about you was not just your trauma-informed manifesting, like trauma-informed business stuff, but also I know that you have a shamanic background. And so I really want to hear more about like when that started, what led to that. Like I'm really curious to hear.
Yeah, that's a wild one. What led to it was a series of choices that probably my now self would never make, that probably looked very irresponsible at the time. and was just really following my yeses. And, very synchronistic. The actual story, I think, would be like pretty boring of like the step by step, but it was really just very synchronistic, following the yeses, and didn't seem like a choice. Like it was, I met a shamanic practitioner, became friends, started running a business together, started training with him, and that's like was my first foray. Since that same commitment to my yeses and to just going where I feel called has led to other, you could call them, they don't call themselves shamanic, but other they're very diverse and deep spiritual healing paths. From like, this is like such a bland answer to a great question. How I got to it was just, following those yeses. I think if you're born to it, you're born to it.
So like, it's funny because for me, like, I know I found myself at a scientific hand analysis seminar in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman there was like, look around, if you're here, you're a spiritual teacher. And I'm like, this lady's full of shit. She doesn't know shit. But it was like the beginning. Well, I had already been diving into spirituality and all sort of things, and it had already chosen me to affect, but I was being very stubborn and just like, la, la, la. But I'm just wondering, when you say like the shamanic practice, like what kinds of things were you doing, or what were some of the
Soul retreat.
So I don't go super into details with that part of my path, just because it's so, none of it is like canonized. It's not things that are like written about. Those are things that are handed from teacher to student. And not everybody can be or should be, teaching those things. And so much of that part of my spiritual path is just such an intricate and intimate exploration through the years. That's a very, very challenging question for me to answer at a level that's going to make sense to anybody watching.
Okay. I was just thinking, when it comes to like listeners, especially some people like newer on the emotional journey, what I've noticed is like sometimes people will gravitate towards spirituality to a sense, but that means in fact leaving their bodies, like kind of being up here and untethered. And a lot of the healing journey, or like the deeper work, is returning to our bodies and feeling emotions. So I think I was mostly curious about just giving some form of a definition, although I know that there are a lot of different practices that are involved. A lot of, I know it's like kind of a big question, but mostly I was just kind of asking a clarifying question.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. And, while the lineages that I've been a part of, their somatic work predates any Western somatic work, like what was Peter Levine pulling from? So it wasn't
South America.
What's that? Would you say, Nick?
He went to South America.
Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't a practice of leaving my body. That really was the beginning of somatic practice. But, spiritual bypass was a really important part of my journey. And while I don't promote spiritual bypass, I do recognize that for many people on a trauma healing journey, it's a necessary regulating step.
To sign off from the earthly world.
Yeah, like if it's not safe to feel into your body, it's not safe to be in your body. You don't have appropriate tools or a right practitioner to guide you through the pendulation process, through, like being able to safely reconnect to the body. And all you have is a dysregulated nervous system and a hell of a lot of trauma and like a big history. Then stepping into spiritual bypass is something that for me, and I think for a lot of people, really helps in forming a perspective of healing, like the idea that healing can be possible, in forming more positive neural pathways. Like I do have some control over my fate. I do have some agency that, for me, really laid a pathway for being able to enter my body safely. And I think it does for a lot of people too. And, while I'm, again, like not promoting spiritual bypass, I'm not demonizing it either, because I think a lot of people just want to regulate, and that's their best choice to do it. So at the time.
You think that it's just from the hip? You think it's like 10% or 20% of people who like, so, the way I think about it is like, okay, A, get back in your body. And then it's like B, it's integrate. But for me, that was, and I think still is not, has not totally come together. Because when I first got into somatic work, the thing that I started doing right away was I sat quietly in my room for an hour and a half and just, I was having a strong feeling. I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing the thing, but I was just becoming more dysregulated was all I was doing. I was like traumatizing myself until my therapist was like, so wait a minute, you're just doing this a lot and things are getting worse. I mean, like maybe we should just like pump the brakes on that. So it's like, but it's interesting to be like, okay, from wherever you are, okay, maybe first you go to outer space and whatever practice you're going to do, get perspective, but then realize you're going to have to come back through the old, your 3D earthbound world and probably feel and deal with what's here, which is, I think, probably the ultimate goal or one of the ultimate goals or one of the ultimate doorways you want to get through for sure. But that's, I like that perspective. I think that's cool because like you might have to trip out for a while, change your perspective, get some miles on the tires before you come back down here into whatever.
Yeah, like really I see people, forming a ventral anchor in their sense of spirituality. And even if those practices aren't the most effective things to help them heal trauma, having that stronger sense of ventral, like having that safety, having the community that typically comes along with that, like can really be an ally when they do start to come into their body, like having that, like, oh, okay, like I've had these ventral experiences. So I have a touch point as I'm moving through the nervous system, as I'm moving through the soma, dealing with some of these more difficult things.
So for our listeners, ventral, we're talking about polyvagal theory, which is the main nerve that goes through the body, the wandering nerve. And ventral is just that state of like feeling good and calm and connected and like that sense of hope and that things are possible. And then of course, as you slide down that ladder, you get into sympathetic and dorsal, which is those feel shittier.
Right.
Yeah, ventral's that sense of safety, and you need that sense of safety to effectively to effectively explore. Like you need that safety or you can't heal. Yeah. And there's lots of ways to get it, not just spiritual bypass. I feel like I'm like a commercial for spiritual bypass right now.
You know what though? I like that. I like that you brought up that point because it's true. Like it definitely had a useful place in my own journey, like moving from religion into like spirituality. And then like there was a lot of intellectualization, which is how I was like, I love my turd metaphors where I was like talking about shellacking the turd, which is like, you can have all these emotions and try to put a sticker or a sign on a label to be like, I'm happy, I'm good, I'm going to affirm. But it's like, you can have a turd and put a sign on it that says chocolate, but we all know like it's still a turd, and vibrationally and frequency, you still got stuff there. And it wasn't until I remember exactly where I was walking through Chelsea in New York City, and it just hit me. And I was like, Angela, well, I don't know if I talked to myself in third person, but I was just like, I'm noticing that I was having fantasies about throwing myself in front of the subway. And I'm like, would I be doing that if I was actually feeling really good and really happy? And I realized that I had been shellacking all this positivity over deeper pain. And that was like part of the beginning of that journey where I actually started to come back into my body and be like, holy shit, I haven't been feeling my feelings. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, I think of that moment, on the personal growth journey or the spiritual journey or whatever, as like if we were to put it in like hero's journey languages, I feel like that's the like, I forget what it's called, like the call to action, the call to adventure. Like what did you? Yeah, I feel like that moment is like the call, right? And, I do think people often go through that like refusal of the call, like, no, I'm good. But eventually you just have to answer that emotional call if you really want an integrated life, if you really want manifesting to work, if you really want any of your goals, right? If you really want that healing, and you got to get that integration that comes through the body.
So I'm thinking now, since you just said that, it might be a good time to talk about why some like more mainstream manifesting ideas don't necessarily work as well as we would hope they would. They sound really nice. Like picture the bike, be like, yay, bike, and then it'll just happen. Like if God wants me to have it, it's gonna come. And which is funny because I'm wearing my
What was it?
little Grayson
Was it
Labyrinth
Louise
necklace.
Hay? Was it Louise Hay who did the all the manifestations, like the super flowery language? Was that her? Somebody.
She was one of them.
Yeah, I liked the book. It was a decent book. It really was. But yeah, I don't know if it's got much power.
Which book?
I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was just like it was kind of it was like manifest your way to, or like or positive affirm your way to, the stars, the moon, wherever you want to go.
Yeah, you can totally. You just need to back it up with action.
Yeah, nah, I'm not gonna do that.
But I think Louise Hay would probably tell you that same thing. I don't look at the early teachers as like they were wrong. I just look at it as like they are a doorway. Like I don't know that any of them would claim to have like the complete anything, like Louise or Wayne or people I love a lot, actually.
Yeah, fantastic.
But what got missed there, I think, wasn't so much even in the teachers; it was in the Instagramming of the teachers. I think it was in the the way it began to be really talked about, just like envision it, right? Or like, and I've made so much money like doing the manifesting, and you can too, and like it's just like checks in the mail. But like the Louise Hay ran a publishing company. She took massive action. Wayne Dyer was an incredibly prolific writer who worked very, very hard to publish his books. So things like, the belief systems, visualizations, like the things like that, it's not that they're ineffective, it's that they have to be matched with effective action. And where, unhealed wounds, unhealed trauma gets in the ways, like what in your nervous system has made desire dangerous? What has made shining dangerous? What has made effective action dangerous? Like those things that can block you at every single level. And I think the omission of that, or that just, they were early teachers. It's evolved, like it's evolving, right? Is why people get stuck, because first of all, they'll be like, I'm going to visualize it, I'm going to feel it, and then it's going to happen, right? They're missing that effective action piece. But often, even when they are trying very hard, they do have the effective action piece or the attempted effective action piece. They don't have the recognition of what part is running their manifesting show. Like who in them is manifesting? Is it a wounded 3-year-old? Is it a 10-year-old? Is it your higher self? Like who's in charge of what? And in what ways are they trying to keep you safe?
I like the, God damn it. I was talking to my guy today about something like this, about who's in charge, right? So some of the main things that are in my system all the time is panic, right? And panic, but it also comes along with confusion. And as I think back into my own journey of trying to manifest, so I remember one time I was working at a music venue, and a guy I really liked was like, "Man, you're really good. You should make a record." And it was like sort of like a duh. You should make a record, but it was like such a light bulb. It was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this record." And then the ones who are in charge were just like, "No." And the way that they did it was kind of just like, it felt like just crunching in. It was just like, we'll take the life and we're going to squeeze it out of you now. And then we'll sprinkle in a little bit of confusion. So you're just not really on the ball anymore. And then guess what? Like 3 years is gone, motherfucker. Bye. I was just like, whoa, what the fuck happened? And it was a guest we actually had on last week. And her name's Carla McLaren. And she wrote a book about anxiety, but she talked about the confusion piece, which I was like, oh man, that's actually really effective. You're really sneaky bastards, like, is it like deep confusion? Like, yeah, it's real, but it's also, I can see how it's part of the tools of the thing that are in control, right? And like, I got to give them props, are super effective in what they're trying to do, which is keep me safe, right? Keep me in the box. And new stuff, absolutely not, right? New stuff is not cool. Yeah, all right. So I'm in the box. New stuff is not cool. It's like I think I have identified some of these things, but it's like I'm not exactly sure what to go here. I'm just like, when I meet them, I try to love them and hug them and be with them, and try to connect with them. But it's like I also feel a lot of time I'm just like waiting for something to change.
Call that stage 3.
Oh, thank you.
I call it stage 3. So like I've actually just really recently outlined the 4 common stages of people like manifesting and personal growth journey. And I think it's really important to talk about, especially in the trauma informed world. Stage 1 is the pre-aha that I think Angela had, where you're like, well, actually, it's like a couple steps before that. It's just like the pain, right? Like you're suffering.
Right.
And you're dysregulated and you don't know how to change it. And you probably feel like you can't change it. And there's a level of like victim consciousness, even like I hate that phrase so much, but of just, like feeling like it happened to you and there's nothing you can do about it and you're suffering. Mm-hmm. And then stage 2 that most people go through is some form of spiritual bypass. Like it's some form of like, oh, I found manifesting, or I found yoga, I found meditation, and I'm just gonna like focus, I'm just gonna be positive, right? But then there's that shellacking the turd that you said there, which is like never fails to, I always find that one hilarious. Where it's like, oh, I'm thinking of throwing myself in front of a train, but I meditated this morning. What's going on? like there's that, right? And then you get the stage 3, which is I'm aware of my parts. I'm aware of this pain. I'm aware of my feelings. I'm aware that these things are happening in me. I can have more self-compassion. I can, feel my feelings. There is some healing that happens. But what's lacking is, what do I do with it, right? At that stage, you have the parts, you have the feelings, but you don't know how to put something else in charge of the area that you want growth in. Mm-hmm. And that stage leads to stage 4, which is the integrated, where you're self-led, right? Being parts aware isn't about being parts led. It's about giving them what they need so that capital S self can step forward and make the record, or grow the coaching business, or, get the money or whatever, right? And that's really, I feel like in the trauma-informed world, we're kind of stuck in stage 3 of like wound dwelling a little bit. And it's like, no, guys, like we got to know that it's there, but like the point isn't to stay stuck. The point is to put your integrated capital S self in charge and be aware of where your parts are driving and not let them do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like if you're like a parent and you have a child who's like throwing fits, you don't just call out of work every single day and just go, oh my God, are you okay? Let's just sit here until you feel better. And it's like, you may never get anything done. I mean, and actually maybe enabling the child in a negative way by doing that. But it also makes sense that it's like pendulation, right? Because it's like the lack of awareness, and suddenly like I'm aware I'm in all kinds of pain and like, what the fuck? And then I realize like some of the coping strategies I've been doing, and then I've been spiritually bypassing. So let me come into my body and feel everything. But now that I'm in my body and feeling everything, now I'm like, what the fuck do I do with all this? There's so much here. And then it's like kind of integrating all those pieces together finally. And that's a really good, I like those steps. That's pretty juicy.
When you were saying what you were saying, Jane, inside of me, a part of me said, I've got panic and I've got I've got confusion. It's just like I was like, part of me was mad at what you said, like, fuck you, you know,
I'm unpopular with myself too sometimes.
And then as I sat with that, I realized it's interesting, and I think that initial reaction is, I would say, par for my course. That's like pretty normal. And then it's interesting to watch. There's a secondary reaction or a thing that begins to happen where it's like, part of me is believing less and less this kind of like, you know. And anyway, that's all. It was a very internal thing, but I was like, just bringing the inside out.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that, like a deep interoception, like the knowing in the moment, like so immediately what's happening in you and what parts are responding. And, you know, what's really interesting there is you said, I have panic, I have anger, right? So there's also an I besides the panic, besides the anger. And I think the ultimate goal of the healing journey is to put you as much in touch with that I as possible. And not, like Angela said, like not sit with the toddler and enmesh with their emotions and be like, you're panicked, so I'm panicked too. But to be able to hold space for those parts of us that have those feelings, right? That are experiencing that emotional energy, and to be the regulating force, right? To be the parent that's like, yeah, I see that you're angry. I see that you're upset. That makes so much sense. And allow that inner part of us to feel that feeling cycle to completion, like you would do really, if like the most effective thing you can do with a toddler who's flipping out is let them do a full emotional cycle. Like hold safe space with them for them to feel angry until they don't feel it anymore, which takes a couple of minutes if you're not trying to like placate or stop it in some way. But to hold that space and return to regulation and be the grown-up that goes to work to buy the food and pay the bills. Or in this case, start the business or make $1 million or, you know, record something or do the dream.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like the business angle. It was part of like trauma-informed business coach is like, okay, because we're talking about stage 4 then, right? It's like, okay, you're going to go out and do stuff, and we're going to have a relationship with all the first 3 stages, right? And this is how we're going to go about it, or try to, right? Yeah.
This is how we're going to muddle our way through it.
Yeah.
I think when you're doing parts work and something is challenging, you're doing, you know, the healing, and something as challenging as running a business, there's going to be plenty of moments of like, wow, okay, this is kind of hard. But it becomes possible. Like when you can reach for the integration, like know who's mad inside you or who's panicked or whatever, and reach for the adult capital S self at the same time, it becomes possible where if you can't have that relationship with your parts, then it becomes the losing 3 years, which is such a relatable story that really anybody on the healing path has their own version of.
Yeah, losing 3 years. And that was, it was, the realization came 3 years later. And I think that was more than like 15 years ago. So I've lost.
Yeah. But like, who of us doesn't have a similar story of being stopped by our wound with something that was really important to us? So.
You've referenced capital S self, and I can from the hip kind of say like something of what I can get a sense of feeling is the size of my parts, because like in that moment,
yeah, I was so wanted to do it. That's what she said right there. Sorry, Nick. I am an eat inside.
But the size of my parts fluctuates depending on what I'm doing and like what's happening.
And the temperature outside.
So I think that my perception or interoception or whatever kind of thing that it is of like, first a separation of like a part, you know, instead of being completely Because when I think that something is really big or occupying the whole space of my consciousness, that's like complete enmeshment, right? Where I am not, there is no capital S self, there is no higher self that is, and the part that's happening is just a reflection of something that happened in the past that's been traumatized. So now we are possessed by something that was come from the past, whereas like capital S self is like alive, and that's like creativity. When I always think about creativity, I think about being in the band and you got to be listening, which is in the moment. And when something is like fired up, like it can be reacting to something in the moment, but all the juice and everything is coming from the past. And so like the panic stuff is tough because like that sits on me like an elephant, and it's like that's not going anywhere. I like the idea of letting it do its cycle, because sometimes what it takes me some time to do is actually like, okay, I'm going to actually have to sit in this chair over here, not doing anything. And it's going to be pretty uncomfortable. But if I can do it and just go through the whole cycle of it, which is really rough sometimes, but then at the end of it, it's like, because it can get locked, it can get stuck there, and it can just like gnaw at me at a low level and really bend me out of shape for a long time unless I kind of like be like, oh, something is here to be felt or needs to be felt, But just like the size of the capital S self, or kind of starting to get an idea of what that actually even is, like that. I feel like that for me actually took a kind of a while to get that consciousness,
Yeah, I think for most people, it takes kind of a while.
So I had a question because I was thinking about our last podcast with Carla, and so she was talking about like her book that she wrote was called The Language of Emotions, and it's a really fantastic book. And she's coming out with a revision, not a revision, but what is it? Just an updated version of it. So it's being re-released, and there's this idea that all of our emotions have specific messages for us and teach us certain things, which of course I believe that they do. But then I think that it can get a little bit tricky when it's like, do I actually take this emotion at face value, or how much do I honor the emotion and allow it to process and feel, as opposed to like, do I need to listen to this emotional message? And sometimes it's like there's more clarity with that, as in if you see like a brown bear running after you, like it's time to like figure out something really fast. So the fear. But in other cases, like in our modern society, it's like I think a little bit trickier to be like, okay, honor my feelings, really feel them, but to what level do I listen to that fear, like, and allow it to motivate me, or what do I do with some of those emotions as I'm feeling, and also being the adult that takes those feelings and maybe puts them in the baby seat in the back and gives them maybe not Cheerios, but says, you're going to be okay. You're going to be in the back seat and I'm still driving this car, but you're there and I'm aware of your feelings, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think to be able to get an accurate message from your feelings, you need to be able to feel them to completion. Completion's like an imperfect word there, because sometimes there's just going to be some, right? And it doesn't mean you're never going to like feel that particular flavor again, but to really like, to continue with the toddler analogy, really sit with the toddler and let it, scream or pound or cry or whatever, like metaphorically, how like, Nick said, sitting in the chair, just like letting the panic move through. My experience with emotion is that to get an accurate message from it happens on the other side of it. Like it's, I think most of the time, not an instant, like I am afraid and that's the message, but it might be like feeling that fear through and finding that underneath that fear is sadness. And, that the deeper message is, that there's a fear of grief or loss that's happened in similar situations, and, things you can do behaviorally or environmentally to bolster yourself or sustain yourself or stay connected through the process, right? But if you can't feel that fear all the way to see a deeper layer, if there is one, right, in this example, then you're not going to be able to really get the most profound message from it.
So the follow up to this question has to do with so I was in a like kind of live coaching with Eric Godsey, and we were doing some Jungian like dream analysis, and it was really fun.
Nice.
And I brought a dream. It was like really weird, as my dreams are very strange. And he had mentioned something about feeling like his internal judge was like not very like how most people's judge can be like relentless, and that's how a lot of people like actually achieve things in the world, because they have this inner part of them that's like, you suck, like you better keep going, or like there's some form of this. But then when I was kind of thinking about like a lot of people that I coach, or that I'm sure you and I meet as well, would fall into the fearful avoidant attachment category, which is having the complication of a parent who's like very scary or very chaotic, and also the source of like love and nurturing that you also need to survive. So that complicates things. And then I was sort of thinking about the intersection of like learned helplessness in a way, because if you were to claim your power, like it makes sense that the judge part could be like defanged, because that wouldn't have helped you survive in a household if you had someone who was a very aggressive, rager, right? So then my question is, when you're coming up against wounding like that, where it's like, am I bypassing fear to a degree because the fear is always there, and my inner judge, or there's a sense of learned helplessness. So now it's like, I don't have that pressure or agency that some people would use to fuel them. Instead, I go into learned helplessness and I just crawl into the fetal position. Or do you know what I'm kind of asking?
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand the question either, but so maybe this is a question. It's like, when you start to throw in some of these like complicated parts, where it's like, how am I able to trust my emotions given some of like what I've been through? It's like, am I underreacting? Am I overreacting to certain things? It's kind of like trying to sit with and understand the emotions so that you're able to like act appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the question that comes to mind is, trust your emotions to what?
Well, okay, for example, like I'm sure this comes up a lot in the business aspect, where it's like sometimes, and well, I think many times, investing in coaching at a higher level, like that can be a logistical nightmare. So if you're talking about practicality, most people aren't going to be like, I have a very strict budget and now suddenly I'm going to invest this amount in coaching. There's some degree of fear and leaning into the unknown, where it's like, is this safe or not for me to take this leap? And of course, I know that a part of the answer is like, we need to get back in touch with that capital S self. That has to be the part that leads. But I think sometimes fear can be very tricky.
Adjacent, like self-adjacent.
Yes, especially when it comes to the 3D, like the very logical realm of practical shit. Do you know, like I feel like I'm not doing a great job at.
You're doing great. You're doing terrific. I look at it as like, what's information and who's the decider. And I fully expect fear to accompany me. Like I look for it. I'm like, am I doing nothing scary? Is this completely the zone I want to be in? I just want to be in this comfort zone. Like, really? And I am continually doing things that come with some fear. And I deliberately do things that come with fear. Because fear is the natural biological response to moving forward, right? It's the natural biological response to our next level. Like it should be there. It's evolutionarily there. Doesn't know that there's not a bear waiting at my next level of income to eat me. It's just like, change. No, you're alive here, stay alive, right? But I don't want that fear to be the decider. Like if I feel an internal yes for something, right? Like that deeper, bigger part of me that's connected to what I want, is that like, yes, then I expect fear to come along for the journey and I look for it because my best yeses are scary yeses. It's like there's that yes, there's that fear. I lead with the yes.
Right. And it's almost like if it's like leaving the safety of the cave, you're going to have fear there because you're literally in the unknown. And then I just think for me, because like, I'm a bit of a cliff jumping, edge riding cowgirl when it comes
Mhm.
to like doing growth and all these kinds of things. So it's just like, I do that so consistently that I'm just like, am I fucking crazy? Like should I be listening to the fear? Like what is practical, like what is the practical application of fear? Because what I found is like early on in this journey, and full disclosure, so Jane was first my friend, and then I was like, Jane can hold space for me as I navigate my business stuff. So we pivoted into a coaching. So I sought her assistance because I'm like noticing with different coaches, I just started to need a different level of support when it came to my business because I got parts and they're smart and they're very evasive and wily and they like to hide and do all kinds of things. But what I noticed is like when I started, one of the first things I think that I talked about was like buying a bicycle. And to my nervous system, it was like, if you buy that bicycle, you're going to go broke. You're going to die. Like you're going to have to live with your mother. Like there was just all these stories like, you're not going to be able to eat. You're going to ruin everything. You won't be able to pay your bills. It's going to be the end, right? But I found that by consistently saying, okay, voices, okay, fear, like I hear all that, but also like it's a bike and let's try to look into some logical things to at least, like I believe I'm a little bit more of a cliff jumper and not looking into logistics because somehow if I did look into logistics more, I'd be like, well, there's no way I'm doing that because it doesn't make sense. So some of that ignorance I think has helped me. But the other thing that I noticed is like following my irrational desires, like I call them irrational desires or these things that my parts have said were like frivolous or stupid or just irresponsible, have been the very things that have leveled up me and my business, like 4xing my business within like a year, you know, like by doing insane shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hiring,
And you're not ignoring your parts, but the fundamental principle of healing is that you heal through experience, right? They're called disconfirming experiences. And to have a disconfirming experience, your parts are going to think that the disaster is going to happen because it has to be like a similar, I feel like I'm going to do a bad job of explaining this. Like, not a similar situation. Like, if there was danger, right? But it's like, if a connection was dangerous, it's going to take a safe connection to help that part of you heal, right? And so, in reaching for safe connection, that part that experienced connection as danger is probably going to be like throwing off all sorts of emotions, all sorts of signals, all sorts of like stop, right? Trying to slam the brakes down for your safety because the only reference that part has is what happened in the past. So to be able to connect with the part of you that does have capacity for the connection, right? That does have the yes to move forward, it does have the whatever, right? To be able to connect with that more wise part of you and lead you into the healing situation where you can now get the good connection, get the disconfirming experience so that this other part of you can heal, right? Like you don't need to require this part of you to feel safe about connection before getting the connection. You just want to have the regulation between those two parts of you, the co-regulation between those two parts of you, to be able to be safe enough, safe-ish, to step forward into connection. And the more you do that, like the more that experience gets disconfirmed, the less that fear needs to show up. And that is healing.
So I kind of wanted to pivot this into like a little bit of like spirituality and like trauma informed stuff, because I feel like there's an intersection there of, you know, like capital S self or higher self. And it's like, I feel like I'm not the best at like formulating questions. I have these like really big questions that are popping up into my head. But it's kind of like, okay, so you know the story of the Chinese farmer from Alan Watts, which is like brilliant, where he's, you know, it's like, is this good or is this bad? Like, I don't know. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because what I've been witnessing is, I think, two things happen. One is, even though I've had a lot of disconfirming evidence in a certain area, so it's almost like a part of me is like, yeah, everything's going to be okay. And then there's like a part in the full, like, fucking freak out mode. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, then again, it comes into this place like, what is the reality? And when I tap into that, I'm like, well, it's up to creation, because like truth becomes relative at some point. And if you're able to regulate and follow your capital S self or that higher self, then you're creating your reality. Or if you fall into the fear, then you're regurgitating the past and upchucking it into your future. Pun intended, I made that. I think I'm really funny. Okay.
I am probably not going to get the image out of my head of a part vomiting your past into your future. And honestly, that's a really effective analogy.
Right. So then it's like, the question I'm trying to formulate from that is like, oh, between those two things, like parts still freaking out, and maybe because it's like at a new level, perhaps, where they're like not fully integrated, that like we're going to be okay at this level, so we're still going to freak out because we can't go backwards. And kind of understanding that despite what things look like on the outside, to some degree, that you can still be grounded and still connect to capital S self, and realize that things can actually still be working out for you, even if you don't know everything perfectly and everything isn't going quite as planned, because you're still in connection with like that capital S self. But I think it kind of feels like the same question, which is like, you know what, I'm just going to stop, because I feel like my brain is sort of circling a question that I can't ask. But
well, I feel like Nick really wants to say something. And before we turn that mic over, what I want to point out there, though, is these just aren't things we do alone. And having support to, when you're having that like parts spiral or whatever, you may not be able to connect to like, this has actually been fine, like a whole bunch of times, right? Having safe support to help that co-regulation. Like nobody does this journey effectively alone. I have not done this journey a single day alone effectively. And you can't get disconfirming experiences alone. So, like I just always like to seed that, because I feel like, having the personal growth world can be just a little bit avoidant. And like, I'll take this and I'm going to do it all alone. And like, how can I apply this with me and me? And I just think it's really important to bring into, like, if you're doing this work, then you got to do it with safe support.
My plan was just to sit by the river until it all just came to me,
Like Lao Tzu, yeah.
Yeah. Because people are not safe. People are dangerous.
I don't know. The story of how the I Ching was written was he was sitting by the river looking for the answers to existence, and he asked a turtle, and the turtle turned his back on him, and he meditated on that for so long that like then the I Ching. So maybe you could have the same thing, but like a little more of an avoidant flair.
No. I recently just have taken to just sitting by the river, like sit down and then just stop for a second. But it's amazing how much like flowing water, just like sitting next to water, it feels really good. Like, oh my God, it feels good.
Real.
And I saw a soft-shelled turtle the other day. A little bastard was in my path. I couldn't get down there. I wasn't gonna I'm scared of turtles, by the way.
Why? You think they're gonna bite you?
He was big. He was huge.
I did see the picture. And now I can't get Jane's meme. She sent a meme, and it's like, this is what happens when you litter like straws, and there's like a turtle snorting like Coke off another turtle's back. Both hilarious, but like really
it's like
funny.
my favorite meme ever.
So funny.
So at 5:47, which was 12 minutes ago, Angela launched into a question, which I lost. I lost the plot in there.
I think I lost it too.
Right. And then when that happened, inside, which this happens all the time, I also got lost because now something's happening, something's here, and then it took me probably a good like 6 or 7 minutes before like it went through its cycle and started to come back, But then it's like I might as well have left the room or like went to outer space or something, And then to come back, and that is the strange feeling to be like I'm here, but I'm not here. But now I'm back, and that's like it's hard to like then pick back up the plot. So
Welcome back.
I think safe to say that there are parts of me that are working with understanding like some sort of existential thing. And I'm probably not in capital S self.
Well, you were talking about like making decisions, right? You were talking about making decisions.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like, how do we manage that place between like reality, where it's like the logic and following, taking the leap. And so we're kind of just having that conversation about like following higher self. But sometimes, many times, it's like really hairy because your logical self and those parts will be like, don't fucking do it. And also,
yeah. So that's like my argument, because it's like when if I contemplate doing something irrational, it becomes almost like a strictly like, oh, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing rationality. Okay, we're just going to throw everything out. Like, who would ever do that to themselves? Like the argument gets really black and white and really like really stern really quickly. So it's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. I mean, we won't do anything stupid or anything for that matter.
Or anything at all. Yeah, I think it's a very meaty question of how do you really reach for these things that are the pinnacle of human development, making money in your purpose, making a lot of money in your purpose, really expressing at a soul level, like these things are the tippy, tippy, tippy top of what we can do as humans here. Like, how do you do that effectively without too much bypass while being parts aware, while letting the right part drive is like, it's a very living practice. I think it's the ultimate goal of the healing journey. I don't know anybody who does it perfectly. I can say that the more I've practiced it, the better I've become. I have a level of like, I'm not going to say mastery, because I don't know if I've ever really met somebody that has mastery of that.
But you've been in the game.
A level of efficiency with it that I got through just like a lot of hard work in all of the areas, like getting the thing, doing the healing, doing the integration.
Well, hard work and like probably a fuckload of trust, like doing that trust fall with like yourself and the universe.
And an epic amount of support. I invest massively, 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 massively.
Yeah.
In support, and I 100% would not have been able to do that alone. I tried for a really long time.
Yeah. And same for me. Like, it's funny because I had just hired these profit first accountants to help me like organize my business more. And they were looking at the amount that I spend on coaching each month. And I'm like, y'all don't understand. Like the reason why I spend this much money and support is because I fucking need it. Like if I didn't, there's no way I'd be able to have the business that I have. No way. But you did a really good job at bringing my question home, like you.
Yeah, it's like, do you want me to keep making money? Then I'm gonna need to keep having support, and that's been there's
like,
not a day.
They were like, maybe you want to like lessen what you're spending, and I'm like, I know most people would look at this and be like, you're insane. Why would you spend that? But I'm like, but this is the reason why I actually do make money. Like the reason, like, and the same thing for my clients, like the reason why I've had clients like collapse their relationship timeline. Like they're getting married in 1 to 3, like 6 months to 3 years, or having like a rejuvenated relationship, or they're doing better with their business relationships and all different things because they're highly investing in that and putting their focus and time and attention and energy into that.
Yeah.
So it works, but also it's like not for the faint of heart.
Yep.
Not,
The businesses aren't for the faint of heart either. So like, that's all good.
yeah.
I forget who I was watching, but they were like, start a business when you're young, because that's like when you're the most resilient, and you can take all the punches and everything. And it's like the amount of stress that it actually is actually really high. And so you have to either have the nervous system or like, the natural tenacity to be able to do that. Maybe if you wanted a little bit of help with your psycho-spiritual, emotional, that's where you come in, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I help people with strategy and healing. And the reason that it's both of those is because I have found that the vast majority of people, especially coaches, like if you're working in the heart-centered world, probably because some shit has happened. Like that's probably how you got on that path. And so, coming in with a trauma history, which all of us have, but I think that coaches tend to have a little bit more of, expecting that these parts are going to be taking you out, expecting that your nervous system is going to be doing all kinds of crazy shit, and being able to get effective healing tools and support to be able to navigate that so you can run a profitable business. Like you need that, and you need strategy, of like just the effective action essentially, to make the money. And I just have a weird enough background that I can do both of those really, really well. So that's like what people come to me for.
Cool.
So Jane, we usually ask our guests about where you first like found out, or maybe like what one of your big awakenings was. We're like, oh, emotions, these are important, and maybe I should start feeling them. Like when that happened for you, or when you remember first.
Yeah, we did that though.
We did?
We did that did we not do that question?
That was it. I thought,
We
You
did
guys both don't remember.
We did the question, but I don't believe you answered it.
Yeah, it was in my mid-ish 20s, after going through a divorce very, very suddenly and having really crippling anxiety and depression. And it wasn't like a moment of like, oh, feelings.
Yeah.
But it was like a period of time of like it was like a period of time of like stepping into or working to step into the life that I wanted. It was like my life collapsed, and I was just like kind of unconsciously like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. And that's how I started. I started my healing journey, I started my spiritual journey, and I started my financial journey at that like exact same time.
Okay. You're right. You did answer that. But for some reason, and maybe it's just because when we ask that question, I don't know, we get like.
Is it normally like there was one moment?
No.
it's like, I have a thing where it's like, I had like a breakdown, right? And it was like, oh, something is going on. I should go research things, like Angela had her eyes pop out of her head or whatever. I mean,
I had many moments.
Right.
Many initiations.
And like the moments continue, right? And the moments continue. There will always be like, new levels and new things you run into,
So I think maybe what I was asking is like, so that was like your initiation, but I always feel like there's a point where it's like, oh, this isn't just intellectual. I need to be in my body, and kind of the realization of that.
Okay, so I do have a little bit of a moment like that actually. So, I grew up in a very, very, very extreme religion, and I left that at 26. And there was a lot of fallout from leaving that. a lot of it. And it's actually when I started working with my very first coach, which turned out to be an experience I wouldn't recommend for people, but a story for a different time, a different podcast story. But, you know, like they introduced me to a method called focusing. And focusing, it predates IFS. And honestly, I don't know that much about focusing because I read 2 pages of the book. Like I bought the book, I read 2 pages. I was like, oh my God, you can talk to your body. And then I just went, like, then it was like continual somatic conversation. And like, I don't know, I look at things like that and I just feel like there's a part of me that just was born to the healing work because there's just so many of those things that have just like a deep understanding has come like relatively effortlessly. And I just have to pin it on like, I don't know, past lives or whatever, or like purpose or whatnot. There was like a couple pages of the book that were really, really helpful in starting like the catalyst for that.
And bang.
Yeah, it
kind of was like, here's your path. Boom. I don't know anything about focusing other than what I read in those 2 pages. But it was just like instant somatic conversation past this part needs this. Like, it was like, I don't know, you hear about like little kids who like do past life, like they always like, they just know how to eat with chopsticks. Like if you've heard of like I'm not like planting a flag in the past life territory, but it kind of was like this thing that I had always known to do. I just didn't know that I had.
right. Which is, it's interesting because it almost like, and I do think that instinctively we do know how to do that because like people do have a nurturing aspect to them. Like we naturally are like, hey, what's going on? How's it going? Right. But I think with ourselves, we're like, well, that's in here. So how do I do that in here?
Yeah. And honestly, I thought it was really normal. Like I thought everybody knew how to talk to their body. I thought everybody knew how to talk to their parts. I thought this was a really common experience. And it took having a romantic partner who at one point was like, oh, my shoulder hurts. And I was like, well, like, have you talked to it? Like, have you asked what's going on with that? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I honestly thought like he was just a little remedial, like he was the only one that didn't know how to do that. And it took a while before I realized like, oh no, this isn't something people just go around doing. This is actually kind of an advanced practice. So
yeah, it's really,
but like I thought I invented somatic experiencing at one point before I knew about somatic experiencing. I thought I invented somatic inquiry. Like there was all of these things that just came as like a result of the intuitive exploration of my own healing, my own parts, my own emotions. And then, you know, I meant like later on, I would add formal education to those things. Okay. But like, I don't know, I think we all have a healer inside of us. Like, I think we all at our core have an intuitive understanding of how we heal if we like have permission to do so. Like just like our cells heal themselves naturally, I think like we can access what heals us emotionally.
Yeah.
I mean, our cells need help sometimes, and so do our feelings. But you know, I think that it's actually a really natural process. I don't think anybody invented.
Well, that's cool. This is a very different story than we hear most of the time. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, like right. Well, so it's funny.
Jane broke the podcast. Remember that episode where Jane broke the podcast?
The freak who was not in line with the program. You were supposed to say you've been struggling very hard. No,
struggle. She just read 2 pages and that was it.
No, y'all, I fucking struggled. Listen to me. I heard the word reparenting. Can I say, I just said, like, you might have to bleep that out if this is family.
Yeah, you're fucked. You're out of here.
Okay, great. I heard the word reparenting when I was like 27. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do that. Like, I didn't even like look at like, how do you do reparenting? I was like, reparenting, amazing. I sat down, I went through every moment of my childhood that came to mind, right? Not every moment, but like all the like deep pains, like I went through there and I just like placed a new parent in that situation. And I really lived that situation from a healthy parent place. And for a really long time, for years, I was like, I've done reparenting. For anybody that might not be familiar, reparenting is an ongoing process.
Like, I just
you care for your parts. It is not just sitting down, although that, that's an important element of resourcing. Reliving experiences with a different lens can be a really important part of healing, but it's not all there is to it. It's like a forever process of you caring for you. So, there were bumps in the road. There were times I was just wildly wrong about stuff. And, I've had plenty of those moments too.
It's good to hear that you're human, Jane. Otherwise, we'd have to take you off this podcast.
Thank you.
You qualify now.
Great. Podcast restored.
That's funny.
Oh man. I'm trying to think of Jane, do you kind of want to talk about more of what you do and like what that looks like, or yeah.
So right now I have a couple of core main offerings. I offer something called Abundance Academy periodically, which is a coaching course that not just coaches and entrepreneurs, but anybody that wants to heal their relationship with money, abundance, purpose at a core level can go through. And I do not know when enrollment is opening again for that, but someday, sometime. I offer the Abundant Coach Mastermind, which is my trauma-informed business coaching container. And we'll be opening early enrollment for that in July and proper enrollment for that in August. That's where coaches that want to start or grow their coaching business and get results like Angela, who 4X'd her income in a year, which is super flippin' exciting. I'm so ready to do that again. Every 4X gets better. But that's where coaches come to approach business from a trauma-informed perspective with lots of support and effective action. On a one-on-one level, I take people for VIP one-on-one coaching immersions, either like a single day or short term, to heal trauma that's holding them back from whatever it might be, and or amplify their business. And you can find me on Instagram. It's the most effective place. And you can send me a DM to see whatever I might be offering at any given time. And I have a free guide on how to make more money using your nervous system.
Very nice.
Cool.
So find Jane at Jane_Ysadora, right?
Jane_Ysadora, Ysadora with a Y, Ysadora.
Yeah, what kind of a name is that, by the way?
It's the great kind.
Very unsatisfying.
I actually, I made that out of, it's a variant of my great grandmother's name.
Oh, okay. See, that's cool.
Thanks.
I like that.
Well, thank you for coming, Jane, and speaking with us today.
For coming. Is there anything else that you feel compelled to share, like a favorite food or song or something strange about yourself, or some more suffering or flaws that you have for our audience?
Did you say suffering or pause that I have?
Flaws.
I like to have opera days in my house. I've had Do You Want to Build a Snowman in my head for a solid week. And I am not afraid to go around my house and sing that song. And I often will just say conversational things in a singing voice, just, because I'm a weirdo and I'm a gigantic dork in my real life. And I like pizza a lot, but I'm also gluten sensitive. So,
Hey.
Yeah, gluten sensitive.
I think I'm the same. It makes me want to sleep for many hours after I eat.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a price I'll pay.
Sometimes, yeah. Good pizza is worth it.
Yeah.
Saw Robert Kennedy on Joe Rogan the other day, and he was talking about when glyphosate started to be using on wheat in general as a desiccant to stop the wheat from growing because you need to get it out of the ground. And it was 2006 when that became like a widespread practice.
Dang.
And that was
I'm going to go to France and I'm going to eat all of the bread.
Right.
So they say if you go, I've talked to people that have celiac and even sensitivities. When they go to Europe, they're like, I'm good. I can eat everything.
But I ordered flour from Italy. I tested this. I ordered import, no, it was real. It was it was real from Italy, guys. This flour was not cheap.
And
And we still we're all kind of gluten sensitive here, and it didn't work for us. But maybe I was using American water,
yeah,
American other things. I'm still gonna
too much American air
in Europe. Yeah, with American air. Yeah.
I'm excited for a second. I was like, I'm going to get this fucking
and
flour.
No, it didn't work. It didn't work, and my sourdough journey is over now.
Ooh. Oh,
Yeah.
that was a
Wow.
good one.
But you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for being such amazing interviewers. Thank you for sharing so openly and letting us all into your moment by moment emotional experience.
Well, thank
My
you.
emotion, you guys need a new question. I'm gonna give it to you. You need what's your dominant emotion right now? And I'm going with satisfaction. This has been a satisfying in the best way podcast.
Mine is I have a lot of pressure on my bladder right now. So patient.
That's not an emotion.
Okay.
Anticipation.
Oh,
like a
okay.
desire. I have a desire to urinate.
Dominant emotion is I'm verklempt. Being verklempt is this is just anger and panic, that's normal. That's always my go-to.
You feel anger and panic right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out here. It's like in a shell outside of my body, even though I know it's inside of my body, but it's out here. And so when it comes from out there and then comes into me, it will get much more intense. But right now it's out here in this candy shell out here.
But your face is all I'm feeling anger and panic. Your face.
There's many layers to this onion.
Well, Nick, I have parts that also think that I'm terrifying and infuriating. So you're in good company with some of my parts.
Solidarity.
Okay, I will share that earlier I was on a group call and I felt major panic and sharing something so vulnerable. And I was like, I know that I need to share this because there is so much panic and just I could feel my heart beating and I felt all this anxiety and I was just like, I'm going to lean in and do it. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. A part of me is and this is generally how I operate. I'm like, when I feel the resistance to doing something, I'm like, that's where I'm going. I'm going right there.
You're wild.
Yes.
I'm crazy.
I'm going to vomit just thinking about that.
Let me tell you, it was really liberating. And, I got a lot of love and then I had feelings of deep appreciation and just satisfaction and seeing myself and being yeah, I was motherfucking vulnerable. And that's I served people and served myself in that moment, which is what you're doing here by being vulnerable and sharing your parts. This is a service because there's a lot of people in the world that are feeling fucked up, they're suffering and they think they're the only ones that have this shit. And there can be a lot of shame with that, not having your emotional shit together. So it's real and you're real. And I do think that you're pretty fucking real on this podcast. And I want to appreciate you for doing that.
You're talking to Jane, right?
You, Nick.
Oh, God damn it. Get out of here.
The part that's deflecting to step back and receive the compliment.
Yeah. He wants out.
Maybe that's what your part had your parts terrified. They knew a compliment was coming.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you.
Don't listen.
No, thank you on the compliments. I'll pass today. Rain checks.
Pretend it's for Jane.
No, when you're talking, it was like a nail being driven out of my eye. I'm just like, wow.
You know what though? Here's the thing. You just said I was wild for doing that, but you have these feelings and you still show up on the podcast and you do it and you stretch through that discomfort. So you're doing it with your higher self. You're doing it. And this isn't perfect. It's messy. Being a human and stepping into life is fucking messy. Mm-hmm. That's what the podcast is about. That's why it's the So Emotional podcast, because I resonated a ton with what you said, Jane. I had 6 kids in my family. I was very sensitive. I got frequently punished and rejected and abandoned for having my feelings. And I was amplifying all the shit that was going on in my house. And then I was, go to your room, go somewhere else and do that. We don't have time for that. Like, stop being this, stop being that. And I learned how to numb. And
Maybe
that's probably why my eyeball nearly popped out of my head. That's really not what happened, by the way, Nick. It's a
No,
partially
they came out and then you had to pop them back in.
no, no, it was a partially detached
Like
retina.
boba.
And by the way, I'm now famous because Peter Crone talks about me on his podcast now.
Whoa.
About the woman with the partially, or actually whatever he said, detached retina. So now I'm famous for having a detached retina.
Yeah.
I don't know who Peter Crone is, but I believe you.
He's awesome, actually. He's really fucking awesome.
He's extremely famous, Jane. That's all you need.
I believe you. I just don't know.
Actually, if you were to,
because I'm just a trauma nerd and I just am here doing trauma.
if you were to be
Sean
useful,
playing Zelda, that's what I
you
do.
would listen to his podcast. That could be a good one. I'm joking about
Okay.
being useful, but
Crohn, like Crohn's disease, spelled like that.
no, like crone, like as in maiden, whatever, maiden mother crone.
Okay.
Here, and he's known as the mind architect.
Oh,
I think you like him.
okay.
He's got trickster energy. He will like listen to what you're saying, and like
Well, maybe I could be on his podcast next. This is stepping stone.
yeah. This is, just think of it on the way up, going that way.
You guys are probably cooler than Peter.
He's pretty cool, Jane.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
He's pretty cool.
I will check him out.
He's fun.
Okay.
Okay, we'll let you go. Thank you for all your time, Jane. It was a joy. This is So Emotional, podcast number 34. Come check us out. Check the socials, and thank you, Angela. And that is that.
What?